You're sitting across from someone who loves you, and they're asking why you've been distant. The question hangs in the air between you like smoke. You can see the concern in their eyes, the slight tilt of their head that says they're trying to understand. And inside you, there's this pull, this instinct older than language, to close the door. Not because you don't care, but because caring feels like standing at the edge of a cliff with your arms wide open. So you shrug. You say you've been busy. You change the subject. You feel the space between you widen by inches, and part of you breathes easier while another part aches with a loneliness you can't quite name. If you've ever felt this, if you've ever sensed yourself building walls precisely where bridges should be, you know that pushing people away isn't about not wanting connection. It's about something far more complicated than that. There are people in this world who appear self-sufficient to the point of coldness, who seem to need nothing from anyone. But if you could see beneath the surface, you'd find something entirely different. You'd find someone who learned somewhere along the way that needing is dangerous, that reaching out gets your hand slapped, that the closer someone gets, the more it will hurt when they inevitably leave. You know you do this. You recognize the pattern. Someone gets too close, and suddenly you're picking fights over nothing. You're going silent for days. You're finding reasons why they're not right for you, cataloging their flaws like evidence in a case you're building against intimacy itself. Someone asks to see you, and you say yes, but as the day approaches, the anxiety builds. You start thinking of excuses. You rehearse the cancellation text. And when you finally send it, when you say you're not feeling well, that something came up, the relief is immediate and shameful all at once. You're in a relationship and things are going well, too well, and that's when the sabotage begins. You withdraw emotionally. You stop responding to texts with the same warmth. You create distance where there was closeness, and you tell yourself you're protecting something, though you're not sure what anymore. Someone tells you they care about you, and instead of feeling warmth, you feel suspicious. What do they want? What are they trying to get from you? Because in your experience, care always comes with conditions. Love always comes with a price tag you can't afford to pay. You appear independent, but inside you're terrified of being alone. You push people away, but you lie awake at night wondering why no one stays. You crave intimacy with the same intensity that you fear it, and this contradiction lives in your chest like two hands pulling in opposite directions. Someone asks what's wrong, and you say nothing, because how do you explain that their kindness feels like pressure, that their love feels like obligation, that every time they reach for you, some part of you is already calculating the cost of losing them? You've been told you're hard to read, that you're emotionally unavailable, that you don't let people in. And you want to argue, you want to say that's not true, but deep down you know it is. You know that the fortress you've built around yourself is so thick that even you sometimes forget what it was meant to protect. People tell you they miss you, and you don't know what to say, because you miss them too, but the version of you they miss feels like a performance you no longer sustain. The version that smiled easily, that said yes to plans, that didn't treat every invitation like a threat. You've perfected the art of being present while remaining unreachable. You show up, you participate, but there's always this invisible barrier between you and everyone else, and you've become so skilled at maintaining it that people don't even notice it's there until they try to get closer and find themselves running into glass. Psychologists refer to this as avoidant attachment, and it's one of the most misunderstood patterns in human connection. It's not about being antisocial or unfeeling. It's about a nervous system that learned early on that dependency equals danger, that needing someone gives them the power to destroy you, that the safest way to survive is to need nothing from anyone. This pattern begins in childhood, in moments so small they might seem insignificant. A parent who was physically present but emotionally absent, needs that were met with irritation instead of warmth, tears that were dismissed instead of comforted. Or perhaps it was the opposite, a parent who loved you so intensely, so inconsistently, that you never knew which version of them you'd get. the warmth that could turn to rage, the affection that could become invasion. So you learned, you adapted, you became the child who didn't ask for help, who solved their own problems, who took their feelings to their bedroom and closed the door, because showing them only made things more complicated. And that adaptation, that survival strategy that kept you safe then, became the architecture of how you relate to people now. The psychology of people who push everyone away is rooted in what researchers call proximity-seeking versus proximity-avoiding behavior. Most humans are wired to move towards connection when distressed, but for some, distress triggers the opposite response. It triggers retreat, isolation, the impulse to handle everything alone, because asking for support feels more dangerous than suffering in silence. This isn't a choice you're making consciously, it's an automatic response, encoded so deeply in your nervous system that by the time you're aware of it, you've already taken 3 steps back from someone trying to reach you. The mind adapts through prediction. It looks at past data and extrapolates future outcomes. If past connection led to pain, the mind predicts that future connection will do the same, so it protects you the only way it knows, by keeping everyone at arm's length. It adapts through hypervigilance. You're always scanning for signs that someone is getting too close, that your independence is threatened, that you're becoming vulnerable in ways that feel intolerable. And the moment you detect those signs, the defense mechanisms activate. Withdrawal, emotional numbing, the quiet, invisible work of pushing people away before they can leave on their own terms. It adapts through self-reliance as identity. You don't just prefer to handle things alone, you've made it part of who you are, the person who doesn't need anyone, the person who's fine on their own. And while there's strength in that, there's also a kind of imprisonment, because needing becomes weakness, depending becomes failure, and connection becomes a threat to the very foundation of how you've learned to survive. People who push everyone away often describe relationships as feeling like drowning, not because the other person is overwhelming, but because intimacy itself feels like submersion, like losing the ability to breathe, like being pulled under by needs and expectations, and the terrifying possibility that if you let yourself need this person and they leave, you won't survive it. So you leave first. Not always physically, sometimes you leave emotionally while your body stays in the room. You're there, but you're not there. Present, but protected. Close enough to avoid being called distant, far enough away to never be truly seen. This can be both a gift and a burden. A gift because people who push everyone away often become extraordinarily self-reliant. They develop skills and strengths that others never have to cultivate because they had the safety net of support. They learn to trust themselves in ways that people who've always had help cannot comprehend. They become the person others lean on, the one who seems unshakable, who handles crisis with calm because they've had to handle everything alone for so long that difficulty no longer phases them. But it's a burden because that same self-reliance becomes a prison, because there's a difference between choosing solitude and being unable to accept company, between independence and isolation, between strength and the exhausting performance of strength, when what you really need is to let someone else carry the weight for a moment. The people in your life don't understand why you're like this. They see your withdrawal and interpret it as rejection. They offer support and you decline it, so they stop offering, and then you feel abandoned by the very distance you created. They want to help, but you won't let them, and eventually they stop trying, and you use their absence as evidence that you were right all along, that people leave, that you can't trust anyone, that being alone is safer than risking attachment. What they don't see is the internal war, the part of you that wants to call them when you're struggling but can't make your fingers press the buttons, the part that wants to say yes to dinner but feels that familiar tightness in your chest at the thought of being perceived, of having to perform okayness when you're anything but okay. They don't see that pushing people away isn't about not loving them, it's about loving them from a distance that feels survivable. It's about caring so much that the possibility of losing them becomes unbearable, so you leave them on your own terms instead, slowly, quietly, in ways you can control. And the loneliness that comes from this is a particular kind of ache. It's not the loneliness of being alone, It's the loneliness of being surrounded by people who care about you while feeling completely unreachable. It's the loneliness of knowing that the walls keeping everyone out are also keeping you in, but not knowing how to dismantle them without feeling like you're tearing yourself apart. People who push everyone away often become everyone else's safe harbor while having none their own. They're the friend people call in crisis, the one who listens without judgment, who holds space for other people's pain because they understand what it's like to carry something heavy alone. But when they're hurting, there's no one to call, not because there aren't people who would show up, but because letting anyone see that vulnerability feels like stepping off a ledge with no certainty of ground below. You don't have to tear down every wall you've built overnight. You don't have to become someone who needs people easily or trusts without hesitation. Sometimes it's as simple as noticing the moment you feel the urge to push someone away and pausing